And we are live on Oz Property Investors, where we have the big names and we have the big fun. We have the incredible Terry Ryder on the show today, and the well-bearded Steve Polisi. Oh my gosh, I'm messing up your name already, mate. Jesus, we've been friends for too long. How are you? How are you, Terry? Wonderful to have you on the show.
Look, I'm really good. Life's never been better, even though I seem to be getting older and older. Really still enjoying and loving what I'm doing every day, and business is good, and no complaints.
Mate, you just came back from Europe. You've just released an awesome new book. Like, if you complained, I wouldn't believe you. Steve, how are you, mate?
Well, I want to touch on that. So when I did a roadshow with Terry, we did some of the capital cities. We did a bit of a commercial resi kind of hotspot location roadshow. And I asked Terry that. I'm not sure if you remember this, Terry. Remember I was like, what's the goal with you? Like, you're pushing on, you got a big portfolio, successful business. What's the exit strategy? And you're like, none. I love what I'm doing. I'm actually writing another book, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you still love it, which is rare, I'd say. I'd say a lot of people kind of tire of this industry.
Yeah, no, I think retirement is for people who don't love their jobs, and I love mine. And sometimes I say to people, because I sometimes get asked, when I'm doing maybe a presentation to a seminar, if you're so smart or so successful, how come you haven't retired? And I said, well, you're assuming that retirement's the big goal. And I think if retirement's early retirement's your primary goal, I think it's a bit of a sad goal to have. I think, truly successful people, look at the most successful people in the world, they never retire. They just keep wanting to do stuff. They want to keep achieving and creating things. And, I'm a little bit like that. The only thing I want to perhaps be working my day job less is to write more books. I love the process of researching and writing books, and I want to do more of that. So I'm not going to stop doing things.
Well, I mean, you pump through hotspotting reports. There's a lot of reports and a lot of places covered. So yeah, you're not a man short of words, that's for sure. What are we talking about today, guys? I guess
hopefully how good your beard is looking, Joe. Beautiful.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. It's been I was in the hospital and I don't have razors or shave, and it started to grow, and I'm like, this is a great opportunity to grow a beard for the first time in my life. So thanks for the acknowledgement, Steve. Feels good coming from you.
Trying to look like your idol, Jesus.
Well, me and Jesus have a lot in common.
Speaking of religion, God made many beautiful, perfectly shaped heads, but some of them he stuffed up, so he had to put hair on them.
Solid. Okay, so what are we talking about today, guys? We are covering off capital growth. That is the most important thing for a property portfolio. Well, depending on your stage and depending who you ask. Steve Polisi loves a bit of cash flow, but it's all about capital growth. We have the 3 top hotspots for Terry Ryder. For the people that don't know who Terry Ryder is, he is arguably Australia's most experienced independent property researcher. He has over 40 years experience in this industry. He runs a business called hotspotting.com.au, the creator of Price Prediction Index, a famous report that uses sales volume to forecast that future capital growth and where prices are going to rise before they do. And previous to this, a little while ago, you were the property editor for Courier Mail and Australian Financial Review. This is your space. It's awesome. I love it when, like, kind of what you were saying about retirement. It's like, I love it when people find their space, go headlong into it, and absolutely crush it. You have been our little, if we have a little dream board for this podcast of people we want to get on there, mate, you've been up there for a little while. So I'm excited to have you on. What else are we going to cover off? Hotspots. We're going to cover off why property values rise and going deep into that stuff. But kicking it off, what's this new book about, Terry? Like, I don't want to make this a pitch about the book at all, but I think you've nailed the title, and I think it's going to be relevant to this conversation.
Yeah. Well, why property values rise, but perhaps more particularly why property values rise more in some areas than others. Why do we have outperformers? What are the characteristics of an outperforming real estate location? And I thought the book needed to be written because there are just so many Australians who are really passionately interested in real estate investment, and they wanted to use it as a vehicle to achieve financial independence and maybe retire early if that's your goal. But so few people actually achieve it. So few people actually get beyond one or two properties and actually have a portfolio that can sustain them financially as they get older. And I think it's because the whole real estate process, and in particular why certain areas outperform, is not well understood. So I've tried to distill my 40 plus years of researching and writing about real estate and investing into this book to explain, by using a lot of case studies and by explaining the metrics we use to forecast, why certain areas should be targeted more so than others.
Yeah, love it. I think what you talk about as well, of where the opportunities are coming for next, like it might be a little bit surprising for people where you're going to cover off maybe, you know, one asset class that used to be a little bit of an ugly duckling is now starting to become a nice little swan. So I guess what are some of those rookie errors that people are making in their portfolios? Like you see all these people that have incredible portfolios and they keep going. They stop making these silly mistakes. They might make them early on, but they keep pushing forward. What are some of those core go-to ones?
Yeah, I think the people who are truly successful avoid making these rookie errors. But I think, as you point out, when they start out, most people do start out by making a mistake. And, you know, a rookie error number one is they get the first one wrong. If you badly stuff up your first attempt at property investment, it makes it really hard to get a second one and a third one. Surprising, though, how many people I speak to have gone on to be successful property investment who do have a story about how their very first one or two didn't go so well because they didn't know enough and they weren't smart enough to know that they should be, investing in research and good advice and having mentors and having a team of experts around them before they started spending the big money. So getting the first one wrong is a mistake that far too many people make, and it really does hinder their forward progress.
Yeah. And I think that's common. Like, sorry, not common. It's more important now than it was 5-10 years ago, right? Like where you could buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 properties. So you could mess up and it's okay because you can buy another one, you can keep going. But the way that borrowing capacities and serviceabilities are going, you mess the first one up. It's so much more crucial now than it was back then.
Yeah. Well, and the sums of money involved.
When you compound the growth, obviously, over time, when you ever draw up like a 30-year plan, by removing the first 5 years of the plan, the flow-on effect is like fourfold. So like you can actually have a portfolio a quarter of the size by not getting the first one or two right.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And many of the other rookie areas that I list in the book the reason why people get the first one wrong, I suppose, and the first one that I talk about is, most people don't have a coherent plan. They just get excited and start looking for properties to buy, and don't proceed with a strategy. I think it's really important. I've got a sort of a buying process, like an 8-step process towards buying a property, and actually starting to look for a property to buy is step 7. But I find that so many people don't do steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 because they're very impatient to get to the exciting bit, which is looking for a property to buy. And they neglect those early steps, which may be a little bit mundane and not nearly as exciting, but they're just so important. And it's all about planning and, understanding what you can afford and what your risk profile is, and gathering a team of experts in certain areas around you before you start making the big decisions. And it's surprising how many people just don't do that.
Yeah. I've seen it happen because everyone thinks, oh, it's just buying a property. I can be a lone ranger. And I like in business as well, you can't, there's no lone ranger. I think it might be as well, like sometimes when you're, PAYG and employed, you feel like, okay, I'm a lone ranger in my job and I can do property the same thing. And it just becomes a bit of a struggle. You can't be the expert at everything. You can't be your mortgage broker. You can't be an expert in locations. You can't be the expert at picking and negotiating. And okay, that's a big one, not having a plan.
Can I ask something, Terry? Because I know no offense by this, you've been around and you've obviously seen lots of cycles and stuff like that. Has more access to more education actually made it harder or easier? Because like even when I started in like 2012, there was only a few books on the market. Yeah, like Margaret Lomas and Jan Summers and a few. There was only kind of a few real data points per se. So you kind of picked one of those expert strategies and kind of went with it. Now I'm finding like every second buyer's agent's just sponsoring ads online and kind of pulling the wool over people. Oh, you got to buy these blue chip areas off the plan, blah, blah, blah. So there's more noise, but then counterintuitively and counter argument is there's more education if you do get it right. So I'm not actually sure which one's actually better.
Yeah, I don't think there's more education. I don't think there's more experts. It's just more people claiming to be experts. And I think you're right. It's harder and it's more dangerous for people now because there are so many people out there setting themselves up as experts in some form. You know, you don't need anything other than a pulse to call yourself a buyer's agent. And so many of the people out there are cluttering up the real estate industry really have no credentials, no track record, no expertise, nothing that's worth paying a fee for. In contrast to the people who have genuine qualifications and experience and have been there and done it, and really do offer something. And it's really hard for people, I guess, particularly those starting out, to know who they should listen to and who they should ignore. And that's compounded by the news media we have. There's so much white noise in media about real estate. I think 90% of it's misinformation, and it's just so hard for people to make sensible decisions and acquire real knowledge with all this crap going on in the background.
Well, go on, Joe.
Yeah, I'm just interested about property data as well, because I feel like property data now has become so much more out there as well. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because what I'm starting to get little inklings of and starting to see a little bit is the data people just say, okay, great, this is where the data is, everyone flow here. And it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But do you see the access to data and that being a good thing or a bad thing, or what are your thoughts to that?
Well, there's a lot of rubbery figures out there, and there's a lot of dodgy data. And yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in my various broadcasts, I'm sort of raging against a lot of the stuff that's spat out of computers by some of the supposedly credible research companies. And like the top 10 places for capital growth in the past 12 months on the Sunshine Coast, which was published in media earlier this week. And I looked at the list and thought, well, the 6 of the first 7 are nonsense. Distorted median prices because of a small sales sample. They shouldn't even be on the list. They should filter out locations that only have sort of 10 or 12 sales in a year because the median price data is nonsense. But this sort of stuff is being published in media all the time and put forward as credible, usable information, which it isn't. But, we've got some slides there in the background, and slides 7 and 8 actually speak to the point about the data. If we could just go through to number 7. There we go. That one, where are prices growing the most? Now, this is, I just compared, just to make a point, what Prop Tracker said about where prices are growing the most and by how much, and what Cotality, formerly CoreLogic, has said. This is what was published about a month ago. But you can see that they both agree that Darwin's leading the capital cities, but how much was it growing? Well, it's either 13% or 17%. Perth is either second or third. Adelaide's doing 10% or 7%, depending on whose figures you believe. Hobart's doing 7% according to PropTrack, but only 2% according to Cotality. And, there are various other sources out there as well, like SQM Research and Domain. If you put all 4 of them alongside, you get 4 different answers. And sometimes just to prove a point, I might do a Google search. What's the median house price for, I don't know, Blacktown in Sydney, for example? You'll get an answer from 7 different sources, and they'll have 7 different answers. And some will say Blacktown prices are rising, and some will say Blacktown prices are falling. But just if you could just go back to those slides again, guys. Sorry, just the next slide on has the unit prices, and this makes the point really quite graphically. On the right-hand side, Cotality says Darwin unit prices are up 13%, and PropTrack says Darwin unit prices are down 1%. So one source says they're rising at boom levels, and the other source says Darwin unit prices are falling. So how do you make sense of that? And the reality is you can't. And why the differences? Well, they all have different methodologies, but at the end of the day, it's all dodgy data, and you can't really take it to the bank. You've got to be very, very careful about just how much faith you put in these figures.
So what do you do? How do you solve it?
The reality is, and this is one of the points I make really strongly in the book, and whenever I speak to groups of people, all that data that we're talking about is backward looking. And, and it might be interesting, It may even be fascinating, but it doesn't really help you make choices for the future, because the past doesn't necessarily inform the future. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether Darwin unit prices are falling a little or whether they're growing a lot. The choice you've got to make about whether you would invest in Darwin or not should be based on your perception of what the future for Darwin is about. And that comes down for us at Hotspotting to an analysis of the economy. And we don't actually care what's happening in the property market and the location right now. What we're interested in is what the future holds, and that's based on what's happening in the economy. We're more interested in the economy that underpins the property market than what's actually happening right now in the property market. So we're looking at strength and diversity in an economy. We're looking for infrastructure spend as a huge generator of activity and growth in property markets. We're looking at forward-looking indicators like sales volumes, like vacancy rates, and other factors. We've got a formula we call the Empirical formula. Empirical is an acronym, so every letter of the word empirical stands for something. The E is for economy, and the I is for infrastructure, etc. And yes, there's a slide. There you go. Well done. We don't want to invest in locations with, below a certain market size. For example,
what does that mean? Yeah, what does market size mean?
Well, I talked a little bit a few moments ago about places that sometimes pop up in these top 10 lists where there's only been, say, 10 sales in a year. So you get distorted medium price. These are very small markets, and we think people should be investing in markets that have a certain level of substance. Preferably.
It de-risks it, right? Like you start getting some real data that you can actually rely on. You can have some confidence in what you're reading, because if there is 10 sales, that's not going to give you anything for the year.
That's right. And if there's only 10 sales in a year, that's a very, very small town or a very small suburb, and it's a high risk place. We want places of substance with an economy that's got diversity, and a market that small isn't going to have that. We're interested in what's happening with population, but it doesn't have to be a strongly rising population, because there are many suburbs that are strong future growth prospects in capital cities. The population isn't growing because they're built out. There's no scope for future population growth, nevertheless. So population growth doesn't have to be a dramatic component of your choice about location. We're more interested in what's happening with economies, and how much is being invested in infrastructure. That's such a big generator. We've just recently created a new resource for the Hotspotting portal, which is about the projects that are happening around Australia. A really good source of that information. And we're playing around with it today. I'm always interested in hospital projects because I think it's a huge marker of growth. And I often say to people, if you're looking for a really simple but effective formula of good places to buy, they're going to outperform. They're going to be amongst those outperformers. That why property values rise more in these areas. Look at where they're building these big billion-dollar hospitals. Now, there's like 3,000 or 4,000 jobs in building them over, say, 2-3 year period. Then when they're finished, there's like 5,000 or 6,000 jobs in running them. And of course, people want to live close to where they're working. And many of the people working in hospitals are highly paid medical specialists. So it's inevitable that local property markets are going to be pumped up by a project of that scope. Now, right now in Australia, the research from this new source we're now using, I found out today that around Australia, there are 144 hospital projects valued at least $200 million. Most of the ones we're interested in are sort of like $500 million, $1 billion, $2 billion. But there's 144 of these big projects total investment $116 billion at the moment. Now, these things are just massive game changers. I'll talk about that. Some of the locations I nominated for, my top 3 for places to buy next year have that factor in play. It's the reasons why I'm picking them. But, Toowoomba, Steve, I know you're interested in Toowoomba for all sorts of reasons. I love Toowoomba as a market for people to invest in. It's got $1 billion hospital just starting construction on top of everything else that's happening there. Bundaberg in central Queensland's got one. Bundaberg's already a great place to invest, but add a $1.2 billion hospital to the mix and it suddenly becomes
$1.2 billion.
Yeah. And there will be 5,000-6,000 people working in this thing when it's finished. So you get lots of bang for the market when it's being built, but you get a lot more when it's finished. As opposed to say lots of jobs in building a motorway, but there's no jobs in running it. Whereas with a hospital, there's more jobs in running it than building it. So you get this lasting impact on the local property market. So we're really interested in this stuff as a real marker of places that are going to really be outperformers in the future.
And is there a timing element to it to kind of think and factor in for an investor? They announce a $1 billion hospital and they're not going to start digging or making it happen for another year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Do you wait until they break ground and then that's when you start considering it, when they start construction, and where do you think about it that way?
Yeah, I think you've got what we do is we monitor the progress because, it's a very good point because politicians are very good at announcing these big things, particularly when there's an election looming, and then forgetting about them after. And sometimes these big things that are announced don't actually happen. So you want to get to a point where you feel, 99% confident this thing's going ahead. They don't actually have to be, rising out of the ground, but it gets to a certain point where, consultants have been appointed, approvals have been given, there's movement on the ground, that they're serious about it. And that we got to that point with the Bundaberg Hospital, 6-8 months ago, and we're very close to when they actually start rising this thing out of the ground soon. So, pretty sure that one's happening. Same with the one in Toowoomba, but there's plenty of others around the country. But you do have to sort of wait a while. Don't get overexcited when the first announcement's made because it may never happen.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see a little bit that people get really excited about are these $1 billion solar farms or wind farms. Are those is there? You don't think about it as total dollar value for an infrastructure project, do you? Are there hospital high value? What are some of the more lower values that might attract you because it's got a big value but might not actually be any good for people?
Yeah, well, I think that's also a good point, and I think. Alternative energy projects may be a good case in point because, the thing is these things generate economic activity. If they're going to build $1 billion, wind farm in an area, that's going to generate plenty of activity in the area, and local businesses are going to be getting, jobs. There's so many subcontractors involved in stuff like that. But the big turbines are going to come from outside the area. They're probably going to be made, I don't know, China or somewhere, and they'll be brought in on boats. But there's going to be plenty of economic activity and jobs created in building them. But once it's built, not a lot of jobs in running a wind farm. So it's not going to have the same lasting impact that a hospital does, which is why I sort of keep banging on about hospital projects because the impact is long lasting. We saw it on the Sunshine Coast. Their hospital project, which opened, I think, 2018, but it was a $2 billion project. And you could see the impact on the Sunshine Coast property market, particularly the top end, because so many of the people working in this big facility are coming from other parts of Australia, other parts of the world, earning lots of money as medical specialists. And the top end of the Sunshine Coast market just went crazy. Suburbs like Sunshine Beach doubled in 3 years. And, it's not a coincidence that happened around the time that they opened this huge new facility on the Sunshine Coast.
That's so good. So I guess if you were to pin down the thing that drives capital growth the most, what would you say is the fundamental thing that gives us not just short-term capital growth, but also that medium and long-term capital growth?
Yeah.
Is there one thing?
Well, that's all the things we're talking about, but I think the first point to make is real estate markets are local. We don't have an Australian property market. We don't have a Sydney property market. We don't have a regional Queensland. We have thousands and thousands of local markets, and they all rise and fall according to what's happening in local economies. And a big factor in local economies is their strength and diversity. So, Steve, Toowoomba, case in point, I love it because it's got so much diversity. It's got manufacturing, it's got a big tourism industry, it's the centre of a big agricultural industry, it's got a big education economy, it's got the new airport, which makes it accessible with direct flights to Sydney and Melbourne. It's got the Inland Rail Link, $33 billion project for which Toowoomba is the Queensland hub coming, and a whole lot more. So it's got the strength and diversity in its economy. Townsville, which has been recently leading the nation on incredible capital growth, is probably even, if anything, even stronger in terms of diversity. Townsville got a RAF base, an Air Force base, a big university, big hospital, tourism, manufacturing, headquarters for many big resources companies that operate in Queensland, tourism, export port, international airport. It's got it all, and it's a regional centre. It's got more than most capital cities have to offer, and it's not a coincidence that despite the fact that it's in the cyclone zone, it gets whacked with big weather every now and then. The insurance premiums are much higher than anywhere else. It's had extraordinary capital growth in recent years because it's got all that in the mix, and that big property market has risen out of that really strong, diverse economy.
Do you still see it coming? Sorry, Steve, I'll cut you off there. You go, mate.
I was going to say, though, really, I even changed my strategy after doing some seminars with Terry, because he kind of did their focus on how the economy is going and what infrastructure. And I was probably similar to you, Joe. Like, I'm the data guy. I'm going to do off the data, but the data doesn't help you in 5 years' time. And anyone who says, oh, look, you can draw a trend, that trend has to be driven by something. And I was basically doing it on the pure data and nothing else. I've actually shifted now, and I make 50% of my decision based on what Terry does, the economy, what infrastructure is going, what jobs are going to be there. The data won't tell you that. There's no data for like what project, how many jobs is that going to bring in 5 years' time?
Yeah. I mean, you see it in the data as well. There's a short-term like sugar hit, and then if you don't look at the macro, like what we're talking about with the infrastructure, it's just going to fall through the bottom, and you see it happen time and time again.
Yeah. So if you look at any one of our location reports, we tend to do our reports on local government areas, not individual suburbs, because media loves to say, here's the top 10 suburbs for growth next year. We don't believe that one suburb outperforms all its neighbours. Growth happens in clusters. Like someone asked me last week, I want to buy in Toowoomba, which suburbs should I buy? And I said, I don't think it really matters. Buy good, well-located real estate in Toowoomba. The name of the suburb is not important. Buying in Toowoomba is important. Damn, I lost
buying into Toowoomba is important, not the suburb. The suburb is not the key thing there. Very interesting. Okay. I mean, you can still, kind of pick the eyes out of it, but I guess it comes down to as well your budget, right? Like in Toowoomba, there's $1 million suburbs, there's $600,000 suburbs. So I guess your budget and your brief is really going to dictate where in Toowoomba you're going to be able to go.
That's right, exactly. I think it comes down to you want the individual property that you buy to have proximity to desirable things, just the basics like schools and shops and public transport and maybe sort of recreational space, sports fields, those sort of basic things. But the name of the suburb isn't that important, I don't think. But media keeps pumping out these top 10 suburbs to buy, and I was asked to contribute to a list like that today, and I said no, because fundamentally I don't think it's a sound basis for giving people advice. So the point I was coming to is our reports on local government areas, but it might be a 20-page report, but only about 4 or 5 pages is devoted to what's happening now in the property market. The rest of it's devoted to the economy, and there's a whole big the biggest section is the future prospects, and that's based on the coming projects, the infrastructure, and they're all listed in the back of the report. That's what our emphasis is on, because we think that explains why we think this area is worth investing in. The point you made, Steve, about data, as I said earlier, it's all backward looking, but there are some types of data which are forward looking, and maybe we could go back to those slides. if you could just
Well,
go back.
I want to touch on that point because that's a really important one, because a lot of buyers, agents, and investors say, I'm picking the suburb in that region that's going to perform well. And I used to be the same. And then after, like, obviously talking to you and Risa, you're actually right. And they'll go, oh, look, I'm buying this suburb in Ipswich because, look, it's affordable. It's only $550 in the suburb next to it's $650. But they're trying to make the justification that it's going to grow and match it. But it's not, because obviously the other one that's $650 is a nicer suburb. So they're going to move in tandem anyway. So you'll never get just one suburb performing really well and all the ones around it not. It's just impossible.
Yeah, you got to look at the influences on growth. Take Toowoomba, the 1 billion dollar hospital. It's been built in a certain suburb of Toowoomba, but the impact of that facility isn't just going to be on the suburb once it's going to be built. The ripples of that are going to spread right throughout the regional centre of Toowoomba. So
there's going to be surgeons wanting to go to the surgeon really nice areas. You're going to have the new students want to living near the, you're going to do that. You're going to have the orderlies that are going to have a different place. So it is going to spread out massively. I guess when it comes to which suburbs, it's just having access to the infrastructure, but to be able to get to the work, get to the job.
But Jeff, if you go back to those slides and talk about forward-looking indicators, the big difference between the backward-looking data and the forward-looking indicators. So if we just go back one slide to the one that's got $900 billion. Now, there was last week on, we've got this news feed and we want to know what's being said in media. Most of it's nonsense, of course, but we want to know about it. There were 4 different articles, each purporting to explain emphatically, categorically, why prices are rising and why affordability is worsening. One said it was because we've got too many migrants coming into the country. Another one said it was because of the interest rate cuts we had earlier in the year. Another one said it was tax breaks to investors. And the fourth one said categorically the price rises and the poor affordability were caused by the federal government scheme to assist first-home buyers pumping up demand in the market. Now, all of those things are probably factors in play, but none of them is the primary reason why we've got rising prices. No one ever talks about this one, $900 billion worth of infrastructure investment happening around Australia right now. That's absolutely unprecedented. We've never had anything like that before. A lot of it comes out of COVID, where state and federal governments decided to spend their way out of the possibility of recession caused by the COVID lockdowns. And they brought forward a lot of infrastructure projects. So right now we've got these masses and masses of projects happening. It's one of the reasons why we've got shortages of housing construction, because so many tradespeople are working on the $900 billion worth of infrastructure projects where they typically can earn better money. But this is one of the biggest catalysts I would say the number one catalyst why we have strongly rising prices in so many parts of Australia right now, because this is in play. And it's creating economic activity and jobs and bringing new people to regions, including people from overseas, and that's pumping up real estate values. So that's a really important forward-looking indicator. Follow that, get information about that, and you're on the right track.
So how do you feel about 2026, 2027, 2028 property market right now? We've just gone through the biggest boom in Australian history over the past 3 years. Property prices are 600, like getting into a half decent place now is $600,000. Like that's starting 600, 700, 800,000. What are your thoughts? Are we still got growth? We're still going to continue, or are we going to start to stagnate?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think 2026 is going to be a year of strong growth because, all the factors that are brought at this point in time are still in play. We still have really strong demand in the market. We still have shortages of everything, shortages of listings of property for sale, shortages of rental properties. We're not building enough new. And, as I say in the book, Australia is a wealthy country, and we've got a very strong culture of real estate ownership, and it's not hard to get finance. And, we have a very wealthy like baby boomer class, which is, typically helping their adult children. So, et cetera, we still have, even though people say no one can afford to buy, people are buying. First home buyers are really active right now, despite the reality, despite the media saying it can't happen. If we go actually to like the the second slide on that page, we go back a bit to slide number 2. Look at that.
So there's the
Look at
book.
this.
There's the book. There's the book, by the way, guys. I'll drop it in the comments to get it on Booktopia. Why property values rise.
Yeah. But
How
look at this. In 1980, and I know you guys weren't alive in 1980, but I was. It's around the time I bought my first house. You could buy the typical house in Sydney for less than 70,000, and in Melbourne and Brisbane for less than 40. But look at what real estate's done in the intervening like 45 years, and keeps on doing. And some economists and certain sections of politics rage against this. And they say it can't happen. We can't have this growing separation between incomes and property prices, and yet it keeps happening because we're a wealthy country and we have a strong culture of property ownership, and finance is readily available and people find a way. It used to be back in 1980 when prices were at that level, typically a household had one income, but these days typically a household has two incomes. And so and back in 1980 or 2000, you had to go to a bank and have a long savings track record with a particular institution to get a loan. Now there's all sorts of ways you can get finance, including the bank of mum and dad. So
what are your thoughts? So like this one here, Melbourne, one of the second largest city in Australia, has been outshone by Brisbane. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, that's indicative of the fact that Melbourne's been pretty flat for the past 2 or 3 years, whereas Brisbane's been rising strongly. But it's one of the reasons why I think that Melbourne's going to be one of the leading performers next year. It's not the only reason, but Melbourne presents really great value for money right now compared to other cities. Melbourne's now cheaper than Brisbane and Canberra, much cheaper than Sydney, but it's also about on a par with Perth and Adelaide. And really, it should be at least the second most expensive city in Australia. That's why one of my you asked me for free picks for next year. One of those locations is Melbourne, and it's indicative of what I expect Melbourne to do, starting to do now. I mean, the sales activity is picking up enormously in Melbourne. We're starting to hear of, auction results weekend after weekend where, sale prices hugely exceed expectations because there's so much competition from both home buyers and investors in the Melbourne market now. So Melbourne's going to come back up the rankings in the next 1, 2, 3 years, I think.
Yeah, it's getting a bit ridiculous.
Can I touch on a point? You mentioned, Terry, like value for money. What are your thoughts generally around that with like value for money? Like how do you distinct between like an affordable area, for instance, or a lower priced one? Or is that when you're looking at the economy and the local government and infrastructure, that's second to that? So do you know what I mean? Like, is there a difference, obviously, looking at that versus the high-end price houses versus a low $500,000 house in a Toowoomba or Townsville or whatever it may be? Is there any distinction with how you look at things that way?
Yeah, well, I just think it's the reality of where the best capital growth typically happens. And I find that the best growth happens in areas that people don't expect, because people do have these old-fashioned attitudes, or the head's full of myths and misconceptions about what works. You've got to be close to the CBD. Well, that's rubbish. You've got to buy in the prime areas. That's rubbish. You've got to buy in the bigger cities to get the best growth. Well, in the last 10 years, that hasn't been true. And the good growth, and this is great news for the average investor, the best growth, the best percentage growth happens in the cheaper areas. And that's great news because you also get better rental returns, and you've got cheaper buying prices. So you've got a winning trifecta, a win-win-win situation. But this according to Cotality, is the top 10 locations in Australia for capital growth for houses in the 5 years since COVID struck, March 2020. And they're all, the things they have in common is affordability, firstly. They're all affordable places to buy back in 2020, and most of them still are relatively affordable, despite doubling in value, many of them in the past 5 years. But they're also all regional, small to medium-sized regional centres, diverse economy, strong infrastructure spend happening, and an element of lifestyle, because I think you mentioned that point earlier on, Steve. Murray Bridge is on the Murray River, and there's lots of lifestyle around that. Kingaroy is a beautiful area in Queensland. Not many people know much about it, but it's a really strong pumping economy. beautiful country. It's a wine district. It's got a tourism industry, so it's got lifestyle. Geraldton's coastal. Gympie's a stigmatised town in Queensland. A lot of people make jokes about Gympie. Some people have even called it a hellhole, but look at the growth. Gympie's on a river. It's got a coast with beautiful beaches, and it's surrounded by some of the most gorgeous countryside anywhere in Australia. So it's got real lifestyle elements. Bustleton, of course, in Western Australia, gorgeous area. And you can go through the whole list. Even Gladstone. Gladstone's an industrial city in central Queensland, but it's also on the coast. It's got beaches, and it's very accessible to the Great Barrier Reef. So it's got a substantial tourism industry and a great lifestyle: fishing, boating, beaches, Great Barrier Reef. So even Gladstone, it's industrial.
Bundaberg, you've got that on the list. I went there for New Year's last year for 2 years, and I actually couldn't believe how stunning it was. Like, the beaches were beautiful, the community was great, lifestyle was great, like everything was perfect about it. It was an awesome holiday location.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's really easy for an area to get a bad reputation. It's really hard to lose it, and a lot of people have impressions of locations that aren't true or are outdated, and you couple that with the fact that people have misconceptions about what grows in value. I often say to people, ugly real estate grows in value really well if it's got certain qualities, and about the location.
What do you say to someone that, like, I was literally having this conversation today, I was talking about an amazing regional location. I'm like, great, I think focusing on this area close to, the CBD in this city is great, but I also think you should consider this regional market. Oh, yeah, no, I'm not interested in regional whatsoever. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, how do you get around? How do you talk to people that are like, no, can't, I'm not doing regional. Regional's not for me.
Well, all you can do is reason with them and show them the data of how regional markets have performed. The top 10 we've just showed people are all regional markets. Pippa did some research last year. Where in Australia has had the best capital growth for 20 years for houses, and number one in Australia for 20 years was regional Tasmania. And one of my top 3 picks that we're going to talk about later is in regional Tasmania. Not simply because it's had a great track record in the past. That's gives you some comfort, I guess, but more for reasons that look forward. But the reality is that the best performing market over 2 decades has been regional Tasmania, and in the last 5 years, all of the top 10 are regional. If we look at the most recent price data out from the usual suspects, for the last 12 months, most of the regional markets in Australia have had higher growth in the last 12 months than their capital cities. Not all of them, but most of them have. So regional New South Wales has outperformed Sydney, regional Queensland's outperformed Brisbane, etc. Regional South Australia, the unsung hero of Australian real estate, has outperformed Adelaide, even though Adelaide's done really well. And right now, regional Western Australia is showing bigger growth than Perth is. So, the regions are still pumping. And there's good reasons for it. I mean, this trend we call the exodus to affordable lifestyle, that's the most powerful demographic factor that we've ever seen in Australia. Enabled by technology, people don't need to be in the big cities to do what they do anymore. I mean, my team, I'm in regional Queensland, and some of the guys are in Melbourne, and we've got other people in other parts of Queensland. One guy's in Adelaide. People, we don't have an office. We've got people all working remotely, and we come together like this regularly and have conversations. And twice a year we get together in the same place so we can actually see how tall we are, because some of them I haven't met yet. But, technology means people realise I don't need to be in the big, expensive, congested city anymore necessarily. So we've got this huge movement of, for 100 years, the movement of population was from the country to the cities, and now it's going in the other direction. So Sydney loses 100,000 people every year now. The only reason its population grows is because of overseas migrants, but masses of people are leaving Sydney and Melbourne every year and going to regional areas, and that's one very good reason why we've got regional markets outperforming.
Well, what I like Yeah, sorry, go.
I was going to say, is that kind of twofold? One, it's for obviously lifestyle, and then the second one is affordability. So obviously better bang for buck. If they can have a city job per se and a city salary, they can afford more bang for buck or have leftover spending.
Yeah, and the ideal for a lot of people have achieved is they decide, I don't need to be in Sydney anymore, so they sell their Sydney home. They go to a regional area, and it might be in the Central Coast, or it might be somewhere around Wollongong or Orange, wherever. Buy a home of comparable standard, but for half the price. And so they haven't downgraded in terms of quality, but their lifestyle has been revolutionised. They've got a big lump of money in the bank because their regional home is half the price of the one they sold in the city. Something like that. That equation is fairly typical. So, and it's not like you sacrifice in terms of services and amenities. I mean, I live in a town of regional town with maybe a population of 6,000, a lot of people out living on acreage. Everything we need is here in this little town. We don't have to go anywhere else for our shopping or for clothes or for great restaurants or for lifestyle. We might go to Brisbane to watch the Ashes cricket this coming weekend or something like that. But we're not missing out on anything being in these vibrant regional towns and cities. So the lifestyle is fantastic.
One of the things that one of the things that you mentioned was, a lot of the data is looking backwards. So we're looking at the information, we're seeing it backwards. You're trying to make decisions in the rearview mirror. Are there indicators, like what are the indicators to look forward? Like what are those forward-looking indicators that are going to allow us to future set, look at the data, not from a macro, because the macro is really, really good, but it's like, why now? What about the, not timing, we're not trying to time the market, but...
Okay, if you go back to the slides and that one with 9 billion, which was, just go, you're in the right spot. So go to the next slide. Here are some of the forward-looking indicators. Now, we've seen throughout history examples of where a market's had very low vacancies and it's had 1 to 2 years of really strongly rising rents, but prices haven't moved. That's an indicator that market's about to take off. And I'll show you in a moment a couple of examples of that. Sales volumes is one that we do with the price predictor index, as you mentioned, because trends with sales activity translates usually into price trends, but there's a time lag. So that's a good forward indicator. But if we go to the next slide, it's just looking at what was happening with vacancy rates. In 2020, media was telling us prices were going to collapse, and for various reasons, we're saying no. We think the opposite's going to happen. We think we're going to come into a really strong market. And one of the forward indicators was vacancy rates was dropping dramatically month by month. By the time we got to the end of 2020, they're heading down towards 1%. That was a forward indicator that something was going to happen with prices. And if we go to the next slide, rents up, but prices not moving. Sydney in 2011 and 2012 had big rent rises, but prices were flat, and then followed 4 or 5 years of really strong price rises in Sydney. That was back in the days when Sydney was a national leader. The recent and still quite strong Perth boom in 2020, this is what preceded it. It was the national leader on rent growth, but prices hadn't moved for the slide says 6 years. I think it was actually about 10 years that Perth had prices that were actually falling a little year by year. But they had this big rental growth in 2020 and prices still hadn't done anything. But then what followed was several years of nation-leading price growth, and its prices are still rising in Perth, though not at quite at those same high levels. So that's another great forward-looking indicator. With the price predictor index, where we monitor the sales activity, that's a really good one. And I'm right now going through the latest set of quarterly data, and it's showing some really interesting things. It's confirming that Melbourne and regional Victoria is rising. It's showing that Canberra is starting to spark for life. No one ever asked me about Canberra. No one seems to be interested in investing in Canberra, but that market is starting to get really busy as well, just based on the latest figures. This is actually the results of the previous price predictor index, the spring edition. it indicated that all those Queensland locations and the regions that have been really pumping, really competitive for 2 or 3 years, just starting to taper off a bit. Confirmed that Darwin was number one. I've just done the numbers today for Darwin. They're just extraordinary. I've never seen numbers like it. And I think to a certain degree it's being almost artificially inflated by certain buyers agents just buying everything in sight and don't care what you pay for it to dominate the market or something. I'm not quite sure what the mentality is, but the numbers for Darwin are just extraordinary in terms of the increases compared with where they were at 12 months ago.
Yeah, it is ridiculous because you mentioned that. It's like it's not a massive town, it's kind of like the size of Townsville, Darwin. So someone jumps in with 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700 people. Those people then will fundamentally jump and change it up. Just going back, so one of the things I wanted to ask is Melbourne, right? Melbourne is pegged as one of the top leaders for capital growth, and we're going to get to the hotspots towards the end. But some of the vacancy rates in pockets of Melbourne are quite high at 3%, 2.5%. Like, how does that come into play from the capital growth side of things, right? Because if there are higher vacancy rates, that means there is more stock that is available to be taken up, which means that the rent prices will not get crazy pushes and hikes. How does that fit in?
Yeah, well, certainly it's a point well made, and there are certain pockets in Melbourne where, and they tend to be the new development areas where vacancies are, like out around Melton, the city of Melton out in the west. Some of those postcodes have got really high vacancies. So we certainly, that's why we're not including Melton in any of our hotspots reports. But other parts of Melbourne don't have that problem. So, the areas we're focused on are areas that have low vacancies and lots of other factors in play. So, I mean, those high vacancies aren't widespread across Greater Melbourne.
Correct.
The overall vacancy rate is like, depending on whose figures, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7%. So it's well below 2 and certainly well below 3. So overall, Melbourne doesn't have high vacancies, but some pockets do, and you need to avoid those. Because
it's kind of like you said, you don't focus on particular something, you focus on the local government areas, the LGAs, which are generally, you're never going to see a huge disparity in vacancy rates in an LGA unless there's something unprecedented about that suburb, like it's just completely different. So I want to go back to Joe's sort of question about when you're saying when infrastructure goes in and you say, the right time to buy is typically once the plans have locked in, you might start digging dirt. But is that the formula? So work out what infrastructure, what economy is really strong, and then go and match that up with your data that you're looking at. Obviously, the change in days on market, how the vacancy rates, are the rents climbing, and that's the perfect storm. You get both of those right, and that's where you get the short-term and the medium and long-term capital growth.
That's right, yeah. Strong, diverse economy is the starting point, I think. Certain population size is important. Then you look at, the dynamics in the local economy and jobs being created. Then you look at see if they've got that additional factor with the big infrastructure projects. And many places do, because there's, as I showed, $900 billion worth. Lots of projects happening around the country. 144 big hospital projects happening in different parts of the country. And another method might be the biggest single national project is the Inland Rail Link, which you're aware of, obviously, Steve, apropos Toowoomba, but it's connecting Melbourne to Brisbane via various stops along the way through New South Wales up to Toowoomba. And, some of the places along the route of that are already good, really good, solid regional places with strong economies, etc., like Wagga Wagga, for example. Really like places that got military economies. That's another thing that really pumps up. Townsville's got that. It's got a RAF base and an army base. So does Wagga Wagga. It's got agricultural economy. It's got lots of other stuff happening, but it's got the big military economy, which really has an impact on that region. It's got affordability, and it's on the route of the Inland Rail Link. So once all that's finished, it's going to be a really important city. Albury-Wodonga's on the route. Parkes, which is famous for the dish, but it's also agricultural economy. It's also a big transport logistics location, which is going to be enhanced by the Inland Rail Link. And it's, houses median price for houses somewhere in the 400,000s at the moment. Then you go further up. Dubbo's not right on the route, but it's close, and it's an important city with rising activity. And eventually you get to Toowoomba in Queensland. So, that's another piece of infrastructure you could follow profitably, and look at.
So that train
really
that's going to make a big difference. That like a train just kind of cutting through, and that's going to move the needle.
Yeah, well, they're spending $33 billion on this thing for a reason. And partly it's because of cost blowouts, because these things always end up costing double what they say in the beginning. But
you're a meteorology.
Yeah, it's a very important piece of infrastructure, and there's going to be huge advantages for towns and cities that are on the route, because it makes them really important places. And a place like Toowoomba, that's the hub for Queensland, it's also got the big new airport, direct flights to the biggest cities. Those two things together, you mentioned, Steve, about Boeing wanting to build a facility there, and Richard Branson with his space exploration thing wants to build a facility there because of the inland rail link and the airport that they're even considering Toowoomba. Plus, the land's a lot cheaper there than in the big cities. So, yeah.
So, Joe, the inland rail, or generally just trains, don't actually create the growth. What causes the growth? Because you have that infrastructure, then the other big businesses can come in and use it, and obviously send their equipments to the Brisbane and the ports and airports and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a lot cheaper. Building in Toowoomba is way cheaper than Brisbane.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely right.
Well, it's interesting because some of these places, it costs, like, you can buy a house, like if you're buying a house for, $400,000, in, Parks, for instance, it would cost more than $400,000 to actually build a house in Parks. So you're pretty much getting an asset and you're getting the land pretty much for free. Not saying to go ahead and, go buy in Parks. This is, I think this is an interesting slide that I just kind of came across. The things that keep people up at night, the best house in the best street in the best suburb. What does this, what does it mean?
I just think people are focused on the wrong things. Ideally, when you buy an investment property or a home, you want to get it all right. You want the individual property to be great. You want it to be in a great street. You want it to be in a great suburb. But those aren't the most important things. Most of the heavy lifting for capital growth comes from the broader region, as we've been talking about for the last hour. And if you go to the next slide, this is a bit of research that Propertyology did, but we sort of agree with this. They say that 70% of the capital growth comes from the broader location, the city, the town. The street selection is only about 8% of the growth. The asset selection can be 20%, but it's relatively minor. So people sort of worries too much about the actual bricks and mortar. You want it to be solid, of course. You want it to be low maintenance. You want it to be rentable, all of those things. But it's not where you get the capital growth. You can buy the best house you've ever seen, but if it's in the wrong location, you're not going to get the capital growth you want. It doesn't matter how glorious the individual property is. It's the broader location that does all the heavy lifting. And just to illustrate that point, that the capital growth doesn't come in the best house in the best street in the best suburb. If we go to the next slide, this is where the best capital growth anywhere in capital city Australia has happened in the last 5 years. The daggiest, most stigmatized, most down market area anywhere in a capital city Australia, which is the northern suburbs of Adelaide, the city of Playford, the Elizabeth suburbs. There's 8 of them with Elizabeth in the name, named after the Queen, not because they were regal in nature. They're quite the opposite. They're really down market places. But the capital growth in the last 5 years has just been extraordinary. And the figures on the screen are the average annual growth in prices for the past 5 years. So Elizabeth South has averaged 26% per year for 5 years, and so has Elizabeth North. That means values have been doubling in about 4 years, less than 4 years. And I had a property.
25% year on year on year on year on year.
On average, yeah. So you could 5 years ago you could buy houses in these areas for say 300,000, and now all these suburbs are 600,000. And as I say, this is seriously down market locations.
Yeah, it's
stigmatized. A lot of people had said, "God, you would never buy in those places. You get a bad tenant, they'll wreck your house, etc." Well, the capital growth's been extraordinary. If we go to the next slide, it's equally, I think, as amazing because it's a down market part of the Greater Brisbane area. But we're talking about units, little units in down market suburbs like Woodridge and Kingston and Logan Lee, and the capital growth in the past 12 months, on the past the financial year ending in June, 36% in Woodridge, 27% in Kingston and Logan Lee, 29% in Beenleigh, and the average annual growth for 5 years has been 20% in Logan Lee, 21% in Woodridge. Most people would have said to you, if you said a couple of years ago you're going to buy a little unit in Woodridge, they would have said you were mad. You're not going to get any growth. And then, but look at it, look at the numbers. And Logan Lee, for example, Logan Lee, why would anybody want to buy in Logan Lee? Well, I'll tell you why. There's a big university campus nearby. There's the big hospital that services the whole region is there. It's on the train line that connects to Brisbane and to the Gold Coast. It's near the intersection of two major motorways. There's lots of big retail and there's lots of jobs in the area. Ticks every box. And for people looking for affordability and to be close to certain desirable things, they don't care that the real estate snobs look down upon it and say, "Oh, it's down market. Why would anyone want to live there?" They don't care. This does everything that they want. It's affordable and it's got everything they need. So people buy there, people rent there, and look at the growth. So
I had a townhouse in Waterford West, which is just right next to that I bought 7 years ago for 180 grand and sold that for 490. So 180 to 490 within 6 years. Like it's not a bad return. And we're talking about the start, how like people get unlucky on their first. I got lucky on my first for that exact thing as well. I bought in Blacktown for 230 grand in 2012, and you've seen what that's happened in Blacktown.
Yeah, that's a good buy.
Yeah, and I bet at the time people said, "You're crazy. Why would you buy in this area that, even the name sounds like it's a bad area. It isn't Blacktown." But, the median price for a house in Blacktown is now over $1 million. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
I was living on the Northern Beaches at the time, and they were all snobby, being like, "What are you doing, Steve? Why? Who's going to pay more than $250,000 for a crap hole in Blacktown?" And the only reason I bought this because I didn't have any bigger deposit. I probably would have bought Northern Beaches, but I only had 30 grand, so I had to look at what I could afford.
Yeah, and that's what kind of drives it, right? That's all I can afford, and that affordability aspect then helps drive the value. I want to jump into some of the questions because there's a couple of questions that have popped up from the audience, and we'll just run our one of our sponsored posts.
Skip my ad, Joe. This is too good.
Your ad's a minute. Your ad's a minute, and you've already paid your bill, so.
Oh, Jeff, I wish there was 3 investing books that covered everything property.
Oh, Joe, there is. Steve has 3 books now.
That I do, guys. I've got 3 books now. You probably don't even have to follow this group anymore. Just kidding. You want to keep seeing and hearing from me, of course, so stay involved. But in all seriousness, if you want to get the full picture of investing, residential, commercial, and development, these 3 books have you covered for the fundamentals. For OzProp members, here's the best part. I'm giving these books to you for free. Just cover the postage and I'll send them right to your door. Go to policyproperty.com or click the link below and get your copies today. You can also get all my spreadsheets, checklists, and resources free on my website. Happy reading, gang.
Happy reading, gang.
Very compelling stuff.
I'm known for my professionalism. Let's just say that.
Yeah, you really nailed it. There was a really good question that has come up here. With the forward-looking indicators of rent growth without comparable price growth, does that also need to have underlying factors that are longer term? Example, if rent is up due to a project that is short term. Does that make sense? Hold on. I feel like I need to say it made sense when I read it the first time, and now it's not making sense to me. So
You were saying basically the point was like you mentioned, obviously, if rent growth had happened without the property growth, like Terry was saying, that's a good indicator that price is about to move. But then they're asking about whether they also need to have the underlying longer term fundamentals, which I imagine is the economy, the infrastructure, which I think the answer is going to be yes, but I'll let Terry answer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. You want to tick as many boxes as you can. So it's a forward-looking indicator. But generally, to have comfort, you want to have more than one in play, and the ideal location has all of them in play. So yeah, there's been big rental growth. Prices haven't moved yet, but we've seen uplift in sales activity, which is another forward indicator. The economy is strong. There's infrastructure spend happening. Yeah, and one or two of the places that we'll talk about at the end, of those three magical places that I nominated for next year, have those sorts of things in play or have had recently.
Yeah, love it. There was another great question, and this might be, when is the right? So we were talking about rookie errors, like where someone bought one of those properties at the beginning where they kind of messed up. When is the right time to part ways with that rookie error property?
Yeah, it obviously depends on the individual circumstances. It depends what type of error and how bad a performer it is. I'm not quite sure how to sort of generally answer that, because it just depends on individual circumstances. Sometimes if it's just so bad, it's better to cut your losses and get rid of it and start again. I've interviewed people who have ultimately been successful. They started out with a disaster and
just bad timing.
They just bought the wrong property for the wrong price and the wrong location. And once they realized that, they got rid of it, made a bit of a loss, started again, started making better decisions. A disaster is only a disaster if you don't put it to good use, learn from it, and make sure you don't make those mistakes again. But generally, my philosophy is buy good assets and keep them, never ever sell. Of course, there's no such thing as never, but and you do get to a point in life when you do see a reason to sell things to achieve other things. But I mean, it'd have to be a really bad property for you to absolutely have to get rid of it. I think most properties show some sort of growth and value, and and there are extreme examples that haven't, like mining towns like Moranbah, where median price went up to 750 and then it dropped to 150.
Wow.
But that doesn't normally happen in normal markets. It's very rare for that sort of thing to happen. Sometimes if you're patient, properties do perform. People sort of might have bought something in regional Victoria 3 years ago and it's done nothing. And I say, should I get rid of it? So it'd be a shame. You've held it for 3 years. You've been patient. It'd be a shame to get rid of it just now when that market's starting to really move. Show a bit more patience. You'll get some growth from it.
Yeah, I literally had that conversation with a client last week. And I was like, we had a 45-minute conversation. I'm like, damn, I wish I recorded this call, because I gave what I thought was great advice. Because what they were doing was like, for the last 3 years, I've been paying, this much, like, I don't know, 20, 40, 63, 3 years worth of $60,000. And for me to be on the upside, I need to be, selling it for $950,000. I'm like, well, the past is the past. You messed up with your buying. You should have been buying in WA, in South Australia, and Queensland, but you can't say that value is going to stop. If you bought this asset 6 months ago and it's grown $100,000, you'd be saying, oh my gosh, this is the best asset ever. But the problem is you've got that past stigma attached to it. To answer this question, like the way I like to think about it, when is the right time to part with a rookie era property is because, as you say, Terry, like a lot of property does go up in value and you just need to kind of be patient with it. But sometimes you buy a dud asset and you can't keep borrowing and it stops you from going forward. So kind of when I see the potential to consider selling an asset that's not performing as well, because then it comes down to, well, I need cash, I need borrowing capacity, or I need the cash flow to be able to go to that next property. So it's that kind of dead stop that's stopping you in your tracks. If this thing is looking after itself, isn't stopping your borrowing capacity and isn't taking a whole heap of cash, maybe it's not the worst thing to hold on to, because when it does, you still have to have capital gains tax. You got to have all those exit costs. So just do the numbers. Is it worth it? Can I do something better with this capital? Can I take my $70,000 deposit and put it into something better that's going to grow? If the answer is yes, then maybe it is worthwhile parting with it.
Yeah.
But
You're talking opportunity cost, Joe. What's the opportunity cost they're missing out on? In reality, it's a 10% switch. Like, they're going to lose by the time they've already paid 3.5% stamp duty, some pesky agent a couple percent. The property they replace it with is another stamp duty. So even if they sell at the same price, they're looking at like a 10% switch. So is the property they're going to buy next going to make them more than that 10%? The hard thing, which Terry was kind of saying, was you don't know if the one you're sitting on is going to be growing 10% next year anyway. And that's the harder decision.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. We've covered quite a lot. Terry, what are your thoughts on houses, and what are your thoughts on units? Where is the puck going from asset type values? Because you've got a bit of a spicy take that I didn't expect, I didn't see coming, and I want to make sure that we don't miss that. If you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I've got lots of spicy takes. Which one are you referring to? Are we talking about like apartments? Is that the one?
That is.
That is.
Yes. Yeah, look, we all know that historically houses on land have performed better on capital growth than apartments, but we believe that there's a major paradigm shift underway, and it's been quite visible for the past 2 years, and I think it's got legs, and I think it's changing the paradigm. We're now seeing more and more instances where units are outperforming houses on capital growth in the same location, and that's because more and more cohorts are opting to make the choice to buy attached dwellings. Affordability is a reason, but it's not the only reason. The old cliche was that land appreciates and building depreciates, therefore you've got to buy land. I'm not sure that old cliche was ever true, but it's becoming less true. There's lots of other things that people will pay a premium price for other than land content. They'll pay a big price for a great view. I think what people will pay money most of all is for a great location, and that's often easier to achieve with attached dwellings, units, townhouses, apartments than it is with a house on a suburban block of land. Safety.
You got a slide for this. Is this the one?
That certainly does illustrate that there are a number of locations, a number of major markets in Australia where in the last 12 months unit growth has bettered or matched house price growth. But there is actually, I think, an earlier slide. If we go back to about slide number, oh, no, maybe I didn't include in this batch. Sorry, I was thinking of something else. Oh, no, that's the one. Thank you.
Yeah.
You found it. Looking at 248 local governments areas in the capital cities of Australia, and 69% of them in the last financial year, unit prices rose faster than house prices, and it was 76% in Brisbane, 75% in Perth. So we're seeing lots of examples where attached dwellings are outperforming on capital growth, and that's a big change. But it's happening for very clear reasons. More and more people are making the choice. Older people downsizing. Don't want to be on the big house with a big block of land, too much upkeep, too much work. Downsize to a comfortable apartment. Safety and security. In Melbourne in particular, crime is a huge issue. Home invasions, burglaries. More and more people saying, I'm going to be safer in an apartment building with security features. So there's all sorts of reasons why more and more people are making that choice. We're starting to see some real.
Are you seeing it more in the expensive areas like Sydney, where you like it? I mean, you noted a little bit of affordability, but like, are you seeing that start at the top and seeing it start in Sydney and Brisbane and the bigger cities, and then start to trickle down into these more affordable locations?
Yeah, it's happening in a lot of different places, certainly in the big cities, but it's happening in Darwin, for example. Now, Darwin's had the cheapest houses in capital city Australia, but the uplift in buying of apartments has been quite prolific. They're even more prolific than the uplift in buying of houses. So we're seeing really, depending on whose figures you believe, some pretty substantial price growth in Darwin apartments. But it's happening I've just did today the numbers for regional New South Wales. So in Wollongong, in Newcastle, in Ballina, lots of different regional markets in New South Wales, we're seeing a big uplift in buying activity for units and townhouses and apartments. So it's becoming quite widespread.
Is it plausible that, like, I saw a stat the other week, it was like 31% of Australians were born overseas, that we're actually starting to see a little bit of a cultural change where the old, like, 2 generations ago, buy land and house on land, that's kind of gone because a lot of people are coming from countries where living in a smaller dwelling is the norm and they actually don't mind it. Hence why even the Darwins and the areas where they're migrating to are getting that as well. Is that part of it potentially?
I think that's another of the factors that's on my list of reasons why demand for attached dwellings is rising and capital growth is rising. Well, we've got big numbers coming in from overseas, migration rates higher than we've ever had in recent years. And they're coming from places where living in attached dwellings is what people know. They're coming from, parts of Asia or the Middle East where it's pretty rare for someone to have a house on a block of land. Everyone's sort of living in some form of attached dwelling. And that's what they know. That's what they're comfortable with. So I think that's a factor as well.
Yeah. I'd imagine people are more comfortable, aren't they? There's another great question that's come in. Hey, Terry, what are your thoughts on established Melbourne suburbs with very high vacancy rates, like 4%, but prices have moved 10 to 20% in the past 12 months? These are established areas that have been built up with great infrastructure, great amenities, but also a lot of established Melbourne metro suburbs have very high vacancy rates, i.e. Hoppers Crossing, Frankston North, etc.
I don't know about the Frankston area. That's certainly one of the areas that we're strongly. And last time I looked at vacancy rates generally through there,
Frankston North, I think is. I think Frankston North is a little bit, but not. I don't think it's crazy.
Certainly the city of Melbourne, Melton, we mentioned earlier, and some of those areas down around. I think the question mentioned Hoppers Crossing, Wyndham City and the far south. West of the Greater Melbourne area, heading towards Geelong. So you've got Point Cook and Tarneit and Werribee, those suburbs. Some of those suburbs have high vacancy rates.
I think a lot of the problem,
some pretty strong sales. So some buyers are obviously overlooking the vacancy rate factor or aren't aware of it, and buying at pretty strong prices anyway.
I think it kind of comes down to what you were talking about, as well as there's some areas like Wyndham Vale, right? There is a boatload of supply out to the west. Same as Werribee, actually, as a suburb. There's a big pocket of area where it has got the ability to be built up, but then there's also another pocket on the other side of the little lake or river thing that is very much established and set up. And then you look at the vacancy. You can't look at the vacancy rates for that whole area because there's a whole heap of land supply over there. That's where all the vacancy is. And where it's all established, where people actually want to live, the vacancy rate there is not the same, but the data's just not there for it. It's just all we have, suburb vacancy rate. And that's it. So you guys have to do that kind of next layer of due diligence and find out where are the good pockets of the area, of what is actually of value. Because if you just buy out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere, just because the suburb's great doesn't mean that area will actually do well. And I know that kind of goes against a little bit of what you would do, what you're kind of talking about, Terry, is the suburb as a whole will grow. But you do see
He
wrong
wouldn't
side of
choose
the
that
track.
LGA. He wouldn't choose that local government area because there's too much supply and that doesn't match up with some of the other part. But here's an example, and it kind of ties it all together. I bought a duplex in Box Hill, which is in like Sydney's northwest, near like Castle Hill and Dural and all that type of stuff. Kellyville had already been built out. That was a new estate. Box Hill was the farmland they were converting. I built a duplex, and vacancy rates, because they kept building more and more stock, shot up to 7%. And I absolutely shat myself because I was the numbers guy and sold it. Just FYI,
wow.
that property was 500, 850 total, and is now like 2.2, 2.5 mil easily. Actually, probably even more now. It's probably like 2.8 mil because it's duplex. So according to Terry, I could have probably just held on to that and I would have been all right long term. But I did the panic sale, moved it into something else. Funny enough, I moved it into Brisbane and that did nothing for 5 years.
Yeah. And the thing about vacancy rates is they can, it can be a short-term thing. It can be a product of, there's been a new housing estate in the area, and eventually that'll get soaked up by buyers. The other factor is that if you're a home buyer, you don't really care about the vacancy rates. It's only investors that care about that. So, and a lot of these areas where they're building new stock, a lot of the buyers are home buyers, first home buyers and others. So vacancy rates aren't necessarily top of mind for them.
Another key comment that has come up, I've just joined, so you've missed most of it. I mean, you've got 10 minutes left, but what are the 3 hotspots if I've missed them already?
Terry was saying Darwin, Uluru, and Cape York.
Uluru. What are the, what give us one of the solid ones, which I think we've danced around it pretty well, but what's that?
We were saving the best for last, I think, but I would point out that, I'm not saying these are the absolute best 3 places to buy, but they're all good places to buy. They're going to do well next year and into the future, but they're indicative of major trends in the market. So one is in Brisbane. I think the Brisbane market is just going to get stronger and stronger because of the underlying factors of strong economy, population growth, big infrastructure spend. And then you got on top of that, this extra layer from the 2032 Olympics. And it's also indicative of this trend that I've just recently been talking about, the rise of apartments. And I just think inner city Brisbane is just going to have so much demand in 2026. People are going to see, the Olympics is coming. The research shows that the big growth happens in the areas close to where the big venues for the Olympics are, and the big growth happens before the Olympics, not after it. It's in the lead up. And I think we're going to have, and of course, also Brisbane, inner Brisbane has so much lifestyle now. It used to be, boring, but not anymore. It's got so much happening. So I just think it's going to be a really hot market next year and beyond.
Actually, this might be
Frank's.
Yeah, well, just on the unit market, like, how do you think? Because, I mean, there's massive these massive sky rises. What's that place in Melbourne? Something Bank, where there's just bazillion supply and demand. South Bank, that's it. How do you think about units or like this asset class so that we don't just go out there and buy an off the plan unit because Terry said in a Melbourne, in a Brizzy's going to do well?
No, I think you got to be very selective about what type of attached dwelling you buy, and there's all sorts of types. I would never buy in a 40, 50 story building where there's 300 or 400 apartments, all basically the same. You're talking about South Bank and Docklands. That's not really the sort of. When I'm thinking units, I'm thinking more boutique, and it can be like. In a regional centre, there might be a block of say 4 units built, and they're all single level. They all get a little bit of land content. They're just little tidy 2-bedroom, almost townhouses. That's the sort of thing. They're on strata title. They're much cheaper than standalone houses, and they're just good value for money buying. And there's a lot of demand for those now because of affordability. So I'm more thinking that sort of smaller boutique end of the attached dwelling market. Or, I'm thinking of, I had a mentoring client. He was in Melbourne. He wanted to buy his first property in Melbourne, and he ended up buying a 2-bedroom apartment in Kensington, which is a really well located suburb, close to the CBD, close to the big hospitals precinct, and close to 2 university campuses, in a 6-level building with a couple of tram lines within walking distance, big shopping centre close by, parkland across the road. And he paid about $450,000, and he was absolutely delighted. And I think he's going to get really good growth there. So that kind of investing, and he's investing in a good location with good amenities around it at an affordable price, and it's not a 30, 40-story high-rise with, lots of generic apartments in it. That to me was a sensible buy for him.
That's the value. Yeah, that's a great point. I just think because I see so many people just, oh, great, I'll go and buy an off-the-plan apartment. Okay, we got 2 more hotspots left, but before we do that, we got to hit this button.
Everywhere you look, someone else is making money in property except for you. Your mate, he just bought a house. It's already gone up $100,000. There's some bloke on Facebook. He's bragging about pulling in a 7% rental yield. Meanwhile, you're stuck scrolling real estate and domain, confused as hell, and having no idea about where to start. Or maybe you're that mate that's got $100,000 in equity. You have a few properties under your belt, but you feel stuck. You're unsure about how to scale without over-leveraging and not knowing what the next right move is. So why does it feel like everyone else has some kind of secret that you're missing out on? It's because they do. There's a reason some people keep stacking properties while others sit on the sidelines stacking excuses. There's a reason why some investors buy under market value while others pay too much. There's a reason why investors know the hotspots before there's any heat. And there's a reason that some people build $150,000 in passive income while others just spend years thinking about it. And it comes down to knowledge. And that's exactly why Jeff Miles and I, Joe Tucker, created the Level Up Property course to hand you the exact step-by-step process that we've used to buy over $100 million worth of property in today's market. We've built Australia's largest property investment community with over 80,000 members, and we help everyday investors secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, all without wasting years of their life trying to figure it out the hard way. Making an uneducated decision in your life is just gambling with your future.
Stop it. Get some help.
And this isn't just another how to buy property course. Let's be clear though, this course isn't free. What? And neither should it be. This is our life's work. We've spent over 100 hours each on this course alone. Oh, babe. Okay, video number 3. Number 4 with million does... Fuck. Done. We've got decades of experience, millions of dollars in deals distilled into a repeatable process that you can take away for yourself. If you're looking for free advice, there's plenty of noise out there. You can go and find that if you'd like. But if you want real, actionable, step-by-step guided process that works in today's market, then this investment is going to change everything for you. By the time that you finish this course, you will have full confidence. You'll have every tool that you need to build an amazing portfolio if you act on it, right? Which is why we have mentoring built in. So we kick you up the butt to make sure that you're kicking your goals. So the real question is, how much longer are you going to watch everyone else making money in property before you jump in and start playing the property game properly? Because the sooner you start, the sooner you start winning.
That ad is way too long. We will change it next year. In the new year. It's funny.
Well, it does have the merit of having humour.
Yeah, that's what we want. I feel like I'm echoing now.
I'm getting an echo on your computer.
Yeah. Okay. Next hotspot.
Yeah. So we're certainly our forward indicators are telling us that Melbourne is really starting to come back after 3 pretty crappy years, and we understand there's good reasons for that. The infrastructure spend is elevated, the population growth is strong, and the value for money is there. So Frankston is an area of Melbourne that we think is starting to do well and will do well next year and beyond. It's got lifestyle because it's many of those suburbs front the bay or close to it. Good infrastructure existing, like road and rail links back to the centre of Melbourne. There's plenty of jobs down there. Relative affordability, and but the game changer is again one of these big billion-dollar hospitals that's been built there, and it's we're already starting to see some really amazing results at auctions down in the whole area. And again, we're not talking about the suburb of Frankston, we're talking about the local government area.
Yeah.
So there's a number of suburbs. There's 3: Frankston South, which is more upmarket, Frankston North, which is more down market, and you've got Seaford and other suburbs down there. All will benefit from all of those features, including the big new hospital. But,
it's funny, these seem to be happening in cycles. So when I first started investing, like the gurus at the time and that I really respected were actually, funny enough, mentioning Frankston. This is like 12, 13 years ago. They also mentioned inner Brisbane. And it's just funny that like now we're coming into the next phase of it.
Yeah. And the third one is Launceston in Tasmania, which, again, a market that's been pretty flat for the last couple of years. What we call second wind markets, places like Launceston and various parts of Victoria as well. They've had a bit of a sprint from, say, 2020 to 2022. They paused to catch their breath for a couple of years, and having got their second wind, they're starting to run again. And Launceston is, second wind market. Launceston is one of those. As I mentioned, Pippa found that regional Tasmania has had the best growth in Australia for 20 years, including some very strong growth in that 2020 to 2022 period. And as I've said previously, the past doesn't necessarily inform the future, but there are some forward indicators in Launceston that we feel very comfortable with. Strong, diverse economy, big infrastructure spend, major hospital development happening there as well. But there's a $2.1 billion AI factory being established there. And I think we're going to be seeing a whole lot more of these as an infrastructure factor around Australia.
In terms of running those, like, where do they kind of sit on this like bandwidth of hospital and farm, wind farm?
I'm really not sure about how many jobs are once they're completed, but there's a huge investment in creating them. There's a lot of investment in keeping them running. They're big users of energy and they're big users of water, which is a bit of a problem about them. But the overall investment of $2 billion is what really interests me, and it's going to have an impact on a regional city the size of Launceston. We're going to see a lot more. It just so happens when we mentioned I had a bit of time off and I was over in Europe. I was sitting in airport lounge in Dubai waiting to catch my 14-hour flight back to Brisbane, and there were very few empty seats. So I just sat down next to these guys and got talking to them, and they were from Sydney, and one of them was a company that makes its living designing these facilities. And he said they've got so many of them on their books, and they're all $2, $3, $4, $5 billion projects, and they can't keep up with the demand that's coming. And Australia's become a world centre for this kind of development, so it's going to be a big fact. Anyway, long story short, Launceston is the venue for one of these, and it's just one of many factors that makes us like Launceston. It's a very affordable place. There's lots of great value for money real estate to be found in Launceston. We had a client who bought a fantastic house, a renovation prospect, but he's already done the renovation. It looks fantastic. Elevated views of the river, close to the centre of the city, and he paid in the 500,000s for it. Launceston has that sort of value for money. So,
yeah. And the price range is super affordable, right? It's $500,000-$600,000.
Yeah. And I've just done the latest numbers in terms of sales activity, and northern Tasmania has really got elevated activity. And just in the last, say, 3 to 6 months, Devonport, Burnie, Launceston are the main centres that are really starting to be targeted because they've got affordability, reasonable rental yields, and the economy. Burnie, for example, has got a very significant export port. Lots of investment happening there. Very affordable. Got a major future. So
it's
I think
also
it's got,
stunning.
good-
Lifestyle in Tassie is ridiculous. Like your beaches are stunning, the hiking is stunning, everything. And Greg's made a good comment actually. He's like, it's cold there, and that's why they're doing the AI centers. We actually bought a warehouse with the data center in it for that exact reason. Like it's cold enough that they actually save on heating, also cooling, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Yeah, I mean, probably climate's the only detrimental factor about Tassie. It does get a bit cold at certain times of the year, but yeah, that can be an advantage. Yeah, plenty of people I know who moved to Tasmania from Queensland because it was cool. You know, they got sick of the stinking hot weather up here. They moved to Tasmania for a better climate.
Incorrect.
Here's a random one. My partner Lisa did a master's in environmental sustainability, and if global warming does increase temperatures by a couple degrees, Tassie becomes the best place for growing cattle, growing produce, doing all that type of stuff. It has the perfect conditions compared to the rest of Australia.
Yeah, and it's as you point out, it's a stunningly beautiful place. I mean, it's got so many fantastic, gorgeous coastline, beautiful little bays and coves, and yeah, a lot to recommend it.
Another good question that's come up here is because this is, I think, just kind of rounding out the conversation, like does migration, so skilled people who are moving to like spots where they're investing government infrastructure, so the government is deliberately bringing people into the areas where they've got infrastructure to help with the infrastructure, do you think that this migration boom, because I know there's a lot of people where they look towards the migration and they're like, great, this is where places are going to start to move, start to boom. Like, does that come into a factor?
Well, it can have a positive impact in two ways. One, it increases demand, obviously, because new people coming in, they need somewhere to live. And quite often they start with renting something, but eventually they may end up buying something. But if they can have a positive impact if they have the skills that are in short supply. I just don't know how targeted our immigration program is, but if it was smart, we'd be bringing in people with skills in construction, and because that's what we have a shortage of in our desire to be building a lot more dwellings than we currently are. So it can have a positive.
And do you think if those markets slowed down or the migration slowed down, do you think that would then make the shift it the other way, right? A hotspot that's been booming quite strong, that had a lot of immigration, and then some project ends and then they all leave?
Well, I think it depends on the location, but what usually happens, like using the Sunshine Coast as an example again, a lot of people sort of move there to work on the construction of these big projects like the $2 billion hospital. When it's finished, some of them move on, but they don't all move on. And lots of other people come in to work in the facility that's been completed. But a lot of people love it, like the lifestyle, don't ever leave. So you get a little bit of both with that kind of project.
I explain it as like forced migration, but not international migration, like inter-area migration, because you go there for the project. Like you mentioned, you love it, and then you stay there. And that's why, like, especially like you mentioned before, defense bases, that's a perfect example. You're getting literally young, healthy people in a location for 3 to 5 years. And guess what they do? They have a family. And then part of that, they buy a house, and then they're way less likely to leave.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why military economy can have such an impact. There's also a lot of coming and going. It's great for the tourism industry because they have lots of ceremonies and marching out things, and family coming to visit really pumps up the local tourism industry. So that's a factor in Wagga Wagga. It's a factor in Townsville and a few other places, but can be powerful to a local economy.
Can I ask a question, Joe? I just really want to know the answer. It's nothing to do with the audience. As you know, Terry, like I love lifestyle areas. What are your thoughts on when you have got like an area? So say you do like, I don't know, Central Coast, the negatives of buying like 10, 15 kilometers out of the Central Coast, for instance, where you're not quite in the thick of it, you're outside of it. I still see really good capital growth in there. It's very unlikely you get an awesome beach house or tree change type house and Central Coast houses go to 1.4 mil, and then your one that you bought for 500, 600K on the outskirts not do well. But do you have any thoughts around there? Because I've always an opinion of like, let's just spend less, get bigger land, more options down the track with a better lifestyle. But some people obviously doesn't have the data. You can't talk vacancy rates and shortening of days on market and all that type of stuff. But do you have any thoughts generally around that?
Well, I mean, Central Coast is sort of a great expression of that big dominant trend, what we call the exodus to affordable lifestyle. Generally, people leaving the bigger cities in large numbers, but generally they don't move very far. They still want, in many cases, they still want to stay in touch with their capital city. They might go there once a week, or they don't move very far. And Central Coast is a place that gets a whole lot of that, and it's so much more affordable than Sydney. You've got all these suburbs that are sort of water focused. They've got bays and lakes and rivers and the ocean, and I think Central Coast is fantastic. So many great communities, good infrastructure, many of them. You've got rail and motorway coming through, linking Newcastle to Sydney coming through there. It's got a lot to recommend it, just relative to Sydney, really good value for.
Yeah, I was more referring to like, say the Central Coast, but then going inland 10, 20 kilometers, so more for like the more regional type areas where there's not like high density. So I'm talking like the lower density, either like surf spots or kind of like Blue Mountains, for instance. You can obviously go 10 kilometers out of, I'm not telling you, it's probably 3 kilometers out of Katoomba and you're a house in the sticks and there's not much else around it. Is there negatives to that strategy?
I don't think so. I mean, there's, it's like sea change versus hill change to a certain degree, isn't it? And when I'm looking at the areas that are showing great growth in regional New South Wales, big uplift in sales activity recently, because I just did those numbers in the last 24 hours. And, there's coastal areas that are doing really well, but there's some inland areas that are doing as well or better, because, not everybody wants to be close to the beach or the water. I made that choice when I left Brisbane a long time ago. I had a choice between moving to the beach or to the hills, and I preferred the hills. The beach is only half an hour away if I want to go there, but I prefer the gorgeous hill change environment with the small community, and lots of people go for that. The Blue Mountains you mentioned. So many towns inland in New South Wales that are really pumping with their property markets right now. I mean, Tamworth is a good example. That's a large one. Orange is another sort of large regional city that's a really happening place with a strong, diverse economy and lifestyle, and it's a wine district. That's a factor. People love being in.
This is on me. Oh shit.
No,
we needed him.
Well, now you have to listen to the Steve show, Joe.
Now it's all about commercial property investing.
The reason I asked that was we bought a house in the Blue Mountains at the start of COVID for 530K in Katoomba, but like on the fringe, it has like a nice area. I saw one that we looked at the same time for 500K that was kind of like probably 6 or 7 kilometers out into the actual sticks. Same price, way better house, 3 times the size property. I just saw that sold for 1.4, and I was like, "Damn it! I knew I should have bought that." But because it's unique, but that also means you probably got less buyers. But when you do get one, there's a high interest in the buyers. Whereas ours, we did all right for ours. Ours is worth probably 850 to 950, probably 880, 890. Like, I'm not complaining, but it was one of those ones at the time. My gut feel said that's a better buy. The data said no, it's not, so I didn't.
Yeah, and you couldn't have stacked it as well. Like you wouldn't have been able to pay that price for that property because you would have looked at the comparables and been like, "There's nothing like this thing. I can't say I'm going to pay an extra $100,000 or $80,000."
But it was the same price at the time, just because it was out in the sticks. Like there was nothing there, so you kind of limited to very solitude type people or private. But then what I think's happened is when the prices move, then the disparity of buying like 1.4 versus 900K isn't that far, and then someone pays that for the privilege of having the bigger land, the location. But I've always thought that about buying, like, you know, the coastal areas where you're buying between two coastal towns, for instance, there's better bang for buck, but it's that weird loneliness / don't have the data to back it up.
Yeah, but I also think like it depends on the strategy as well of what you're going for, because kind of what you spoke about there was like the extra land size to be able to do something with it as well. And like I see people like, oh my gosh, I want this development strategy in this area, and it just doesn't stack up. And it's like, well, actually, development, yes, there's going to be more capital growth in this area, but to be honest, a development strategy is going to work far better over here because you've got the bigger land size. You can put 3 on the block rather than 2 on a block, which is not going to give you anything. So I think that's another point that has the upside as well. Here he is. We've got him back. And there's no echo, even better.
Don't know what happened there. And
it just disappeared.
Suddenly you weren't there anymore.
Just kept talking.
He gave the secret for Hotspot.
Yeah, he's in number 4 hotspot. This has been a super wide-ranging conversation. I know we were meant to talk about, you know, the rookie errors, and we got to like 3, and then fell into what I think is a far better conversation about capital growth, about solid infrastructure. One of the things that you're doing is all of this research, all of this data, all of this analysis, like. It's funny, you know, you run this big business, you've got a lot of staff, and you're still the guy, you're still doing the data, you're still in spreadsheets. But how do we get access to this? How do we get more kind of Terry in our life and access to some of this data that you're crunching and doing?
I've never, ever heard anyone before ask for have more Terry in their lives. This is a special moment for me. Look, in terms of accessing sort of information and data, you know, we've got a pretty special portal now, and we keep adding features to it and making it better. And we've won 3 national awards for innovation in the last 12 months or so for it. But we've got different grades of membership, and it starts at quite a very affordable and basic level. The Hotspot membership is only $2.99 a year, and you don't get access to all our toys and bells and whistles, but you do get access to a lot of the most important ones. And if you want more, you can go to a high grade of membership. And there's actually four levels of membership that we offer. And sort of behind the scenes in the portal, you can access, you know, all the key data on pretty much every town and suburb in the country, every individual property in the country. We have an entry with illustration and sales history and all of that, value, computer generated valuation, that's current market value based on, you know, sales in the area. So there's a lot of tools available for not a huge amount of money, and it's just pretty valuable stuff. And we've just added property match to it, where you can put on all. You can search in a couple of ways. You want to find a location that meets all your parameters, your price range, etc., etc. You can put in your lots of filters, and I'll tell you all the places in Australia that meet your criteria, or it'll tell you search in another way and get all the individual properties that are for sale that meet your criteria. So
yeah, so well, I mean, all of this stuff, like. When you're researching property, you're spending hundreds and hundreds, 500, 600, $500,000. You've got to invest in this kind of stuff, especially from a macro fundamentals, because there's no way you're going to go out there and be able to do, well, not no way, but you're going to spend hundreds of hours trying to get access to this stuff. We're not sponsored by Terry, or I you know, like, I don't want to try and see that I'm pushing people onto it. But incredible stuff in these reports, incredible stuff in the portal as well. So I think you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So make sure that you're understanding the macro, because like Steve said at the outset, you can look at the data for what's going to happen in the short term. And I see this happen all the time, where people are like, oh my gosh, this place stacks up from a spreadsheet. I tell you what, a prime example is a place called Emerald in Queensland. the data for Emerald, if you look at it from the short-term perspective, is looking pretty good. Like stock is really low, supply is tight, social economics is really good, the valuation is very good. But when you look at Emerald, it's just some bogged out. Oh, okay, I don't want to disparage it, but it's a mining town in the middle of nowhere, west of Rockhampton. I haven't done any macro fundamentals on it, but it just doesn't look like it's making sense. So I see people just focusing in on that. And then you've also got the book as well, Why Property Values Rise. So that is that's actually on sale. Oh no, that's the ebook. But anyway, with Booktopia, check that out as well.
Yeah,
That's your 18th book, isn't it, Terry?
What's that?
That's your 18th book, isn't it?
Is it?
Not quite. No, it's my 5th actually. My first for a while because I've been really busy creating and expanding this business. But just to maybe a thought to finish off, just apropos what you were just saying, Joe. You know, when we started out talking about the rookie eras, and then we kind of got diverted and talking about other things. But I think the most important of the 12 rookie eras I talk about in the book is one by which people are reluctant to invest in information and advice. You know, people will get a loan and spend $500,000 or $700,000 on a piece of real estate, but they won't spend a few $1,000s on information or advice. We also say to people, build your team before you build your portfolio. You know, have a good accountant that understands real estate. Have a good mortgage broker on your team. You know, have a mentor if you can find one who's been there, done that, and can give you good advice. Be prepared to pay for good information, like some of our memberships that are relatively inexpensive, but can be the game changer in terms of making good choices. You know, get a good buyer's agent. You know, if you buy in the right place, a couple of months of capital grow, you'll recoup everything you've spent on advice and information. But so many people want to penny pinch their way to success, and you can't. So I think that's probably the most important of the rookie eras, not to repeat. If you want to be successful, be willing to invest in good advice and good information. You've got a much better chance of success if you do that.
Well said.
Perfect.
I think we ended on that, mate. This has been an unreal session. Jump onto Hotspotting, check out the reports, do all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you, Steve, for being of Policey Property, being a big part of this session. And yeah, let's go buy a property, guys. Let's go research a property, get the fundamentals, and make it happen.
Thanks,
See you
Terry.
later.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Terry.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Really